Hello and welcome to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. Today we're talking to Gianfranco Cuzziol. Gianfranco is a CRM and personalisation advisor, speaker, author, consultant and educator. He's worked both client and agency side, leading global CRM for brands like Aesop. He's recently launched his CRMBA, a Mini MBA designed for CRM and Loyalty practitioners, and I'm delighted to have him on the podcast to talk about a wide range of topics. I hope you enjoy our chat. So, as I said in the intro, I am delighted to welcome Gianfranco to the podcast today. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you here. Regular listeners will know that the first thing we do with every guest is do the credibility section. And the credibility section is just a chance for you to explain who you are, your background, your experience, so that listeners who maybe don't know who you are will understand that background and understand where your opinions are coming from. So can you give us a bit of a rundown of your experience, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I guess this is just a polite way of you asking, why should we listen to you?
100%. There's a reason we call it the credibility section.
Yeah. Won't last long. No, seriously. So I've probably spent the last 20, 25 years in the CRM, loyalty, personalization space, but actually, in reality, I only fell into it after being the worst astrophysicist at my university and being a really bad second-hand car salesman as well. But in reality, actually, those two life moments.
I was going to say.
Yeah, they taught me.
It's a good mix, actually, for a CRM.
They taught me some good things, right? So being a second-hand car salesman, 30 years ago on a forecourt, selling second-hand cars, you understand that you get to know a lot about human mindset and behavior. Yeah. So actually, that's a few things that I've kind of dragged along into my world now, which has been really interesting. And also learned about averages as well. I remember all of my customers, all of my punters, as we call them, seemingly all of them would fail the finance checks. So I remember in one instance, I actually sold a car twice one weekend to different people to see whether on average I get the deal through over the weekend. That's where I learned that actually averages don't work in that way, because both of them failed the finance checks.
I'm not sure it would have been worse for them both to fail or for them both to pass, because then you're in trouble.
We would have found them another car. I'm sure. And then after that, I kind of fell into the world of data-driven marketing, as it used to be called. Went to work for a customer outsourced service organization, and we used to do all of the direct marketing and billing for the likes of the old Next Directory and O2 Cellnet and a few department stores. Then went to work for Royal Mail, where I actually spent a lot of that time convincing FMCG brands to move their above the line spend to below the line. So using this data-driven technique that we were all talking about, and of course Royal Mail wanted to push. And then actually for a while I was a product manager, and I looked after the response services portfolio, so free post, business reply. The highlight there was launching a product called Free Post Name, which is still going now, where actually you just write down free post and the name of the brand, and the envelope comes back to you. We used to have to give commission for companies to use brand names and terms. The most interesting one that we had was someone applied for Free Post Farty Pants, which I won't go into the detail, but there's a lot of debate as to whether we should issue that license. Went to work for a tech company, actually a personalization company for a while, and then kind of fell into the world of being a freelance consultant, independent person. Worked with some interesting brands, but then moved into the agency world as a planner, strategy director, and so I got to work with some amazing brands, so True Religion Jeans, Disney, BT, Barrett Homes, Diageo, Adidas, you name it. Similar experience to you. You get to work with some amazing brands when you're agency side. And then about 8 years ago, back to client side. So I had the amazing opportunity to be global head of CRM for a lovely brand, skincare, body care brand called Aesop, which your Australian viewers will no doubt have heard of. And I'm sure you have, based out of Melbourne. And there I got the opportunity to revamp their CRM strategy, build out the business case for new MarTech infrastructure, and set up the CRM organization across the world. At the time, Aesop were part of the Natura & Co group. So I went to work for Group and oversaw personalization and CRM for four lovely brands. So Aesop, The Body Shop, Avon, and Natura in Latin America, which was quite an experience. And it kind of working in that environment, we all know that actually, CRM that you devise, a CRM strategy that you devise in London isn't necessarily executed in the same way in Paris and in Korea, right? But actually what I learned sitting at group level there was actually not just the difference in the way that CRM strategies deliver, but actually the way that you educate, train, and communicate what you're trying to do to those disparate audiences and cultures. So that was a great time. I was there for about 4 years in total. And then moved back into freelancing and consulting, and I've worked with some other brands from CDP implementation to working with connected packaging, to doing some mentoring and educating. So quite a varied background, I think.
I mean, and I will say this, the worst astrophysicist is probably smarter than a lot of people. A lot of people based on...
Yeah, well, so legitimately, if I'm working with a client now and I say to them, this is not rocket science, I say it with some level of credibility.
Right? Some level of authority. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were talking, and we kind of talk about questions before we record these podcasts and what have you, one of the things I think you were quite interested in, sort of been talking about these kind of areas of topics, was the phrase and the kind of terminology of CRM, and that it seems to be a terminology. I mean, you said earlier, data-driven marketing, CRM. It just used to be direct marketing back in the day, and how its meaning varies across industry and even within clients. Teams call it different stuff, and so I know you want to kind of give your perspective a little bit about why that is and what's that sort of perspective that you want to bring to that kind of conversation?
Yeah, so I think that over my career, I think obviously CRM has become much more powerful, but much more misunderstood, I think, right? So there are more tools, more dashboards, more automation, and yet sometimes it loses that clarity that I think we all aspire to get when we're delivering communications to customers. So I think the CRM is one of the most abused acronyms in marketing, right? And to some people, it's just, well, that's the email team, yeah? To some people, it's a platform. To others, it smacks of B2B. And to some departments in the business, to them, it's just, well, that's just another cost center that needs to justify its position in the organization. But I think that, as a strategist and when you would produce content, we talk about the idea that, well, CRM is the operating system about how a company remembers and interprets customer needs and stuff. But I genuinely feel that CRM is the bridge between the brand and how the customer experiences the brand, right? Because actually using data helps deliver a very personal view of the brand to a customer. And I think that, it genuinely encompasses a whole bunch of different elements of business thinking, right? Whether that's economics, psychology, technology, and a bit of humanity thrown in, right? So I think that it can often get treated as something that happens at the end of the line, right? It's an execution thing. I'm sure you've come across this where, it's, well, you guys just need to send the newsletter, right? Or have you remembered to trigger the basket reminder or deploy the birthday offer? Whereas I think we both view it as being much more a strategic part of the business, right? I'm not going to say that CRM and the retention element of it is much more important than acquisition, right? Because I think that's just what a lot of CRM people say.
Byron Sharp would disagree with you as well.
I absolutely, right. So I think there is absolutely a balance between those two, and that balance will vary depending on whether you're a startup, right, or whether you're a well-established business, or whether you're a subscription business. So I think that there's that adage that good acquisition makes retention easier, and good retention makes your acquisition easier, which I think is a really nice saying. But in terms of CRM, I think that the only important word in that acronym is customer. Right? And I know you've worked with Disney previously as why they have a very nice turn of phrase, which is to them it's not CRM, it's CMR, which is customer managed relationships, which again is it's a bit clunky, but I think that it does bring the customer front and center to this, right? Because I think that it is much more about what the customer wants from you and the type of relationship they want from you, and the fact that they don't want to be managed, right? They want to, in particular these days, they're in the driving seat, right? And to a certain extent, we have to not to a certain extent, but we need to deliver on their needs and objectives. So I think that if we look at CRM through that lens of bridging brand to customer, I think it's really important because it's not just email, right? But it's what drives conversations in a retail environment. It's what drives personalization on the website. It's what delivers the loyalty program. And we always think of it as being an outward-facing function, whereas actually smart companies use CRM to drive internal development as well. So you use CRM to understand and making sure that stock availability is right in your different retail outlets, that discounting is minimized, right? That you use customer insights to fuel new product development, and that you drive effective and efficient acquisition because you're using your CRM data in the right way. To touch on those, so Boots use their customer data to understand male shopping behavior in the skincare category, right? Great use of CRM data. I remember working with BT and using CRM data to minimize the number of calls coming into their call center, which created frustration for the customer because they understood they were picking up the right signals from customers and why they were churning, why they were calling the call center. I used to try and convince some of the agencies that I worked in that CRM was literally the be all and the end all. I didn't always win that conversation, but it got me the opportunity to set up CRM and analytics capabilities in a couple of agencies. So I think some agencies understood the value of this thing called CRM, or however you want to call it, because to some people it's retention marketing, to some people it's life cycle marketing.
Yeah, and I think the definition you've given there is one you might have an argument with a CX person. You're getting into customer experience, and there's clear sort of overlaps in that space. It is still the case, I think, in a lot of places that CRM is the red-headed stepchild in agency lands. So I've worked on many an integrated campaign, and CRM always gets talked about last. Always. And the creative is always a big brand agency taking a big brand idea and trying to shove it, the same bunch of assets, into an email. I think partly the whole what is it and what do we do and how does that change hurts CRM practitioners, I think, because there isn't this. Everyone knows what a TV ad is. Everyone knows what advertising is. CRM is so nebulous, as you say, in terms of how deep that the rabbit hole goes for certain brands, and it makes it hard, I think. That kind of consistency of terms, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's funny because actually, having worked on some tech implementations as well, so often with a tech implementation, whether it's a new CRM platform or whether it's a customer data platform, often it's the front bit, it's the acquisition piece that kind of takes front and center, as you suggest, and then you get this new shiny toy into the business, and you've forgotten about the use cases, and you've forgotten about the teams that need to be deployed to run that. So you're right. So sometimes it's the brand that takes over, or it's the toy that takes over, and the back end. Essentially, what probably is the most important element of it, getting this thing to work and getting customers to buy into what you want to deliver, is by brands.
I think the biggest. And this is all, I'd be interested in your experience, but my biggest common denominator in clients who come to agencies, especially sort of CRM-focused agencies, is we've bought this expensive piece of kit and we're using 10% of it. Yeah. Like, how do we unlock the rest of the value that was sold to us? Now, there's an argument that says vendors maybe could do a better, more honest job in how they sell things. But I also think part of that is on the brands to figure out, okay, what should our CRM strategy be, and who do we want to talk to, and how do we want to make this work, and then let's go and find the right kit for it before you just kind of go and buy the Ferrari and then realize you got no garage to put it in. That's a terrible analogy, but you get the point.
The brands and the teams that think about the use cases in advance of technology, in fact, even before hiring an agency, right? So think about what those use cases are. They're the ones that buy the right tech and end up using more than 10% of it, and end up hiring the right agencies as well. I mean, I've worked agency side, right? So I think that the number of brands that, because they know they're going to hire an agency, then think that they don't have to do any thinking, because they're just going to hire the agency to do the thinking, right? Which, don't get me wrong, has paid my mortgage for a number of years, but there needs to be some hard work that needs to be done up front before you choose the right tech and agency.
I remember working on an automotive brand in Australia, and we were asked to write the CRM strategy for the next 6 months. I'm like, well, what are you doing then? And also, I think if you abdicating, this is precursor to the conversation a little bit we might have in a minute on AI. Don't abdicate your thinking, because if you abdicate your thinking, what good are you? You know what I mean? And I think the same whether it's you're using an agency to do it or whatever. I think that's a really important point. So from brands that you've seen who do it well, we've got make sure you know what you're going to buy your tech for and all those kind of things. What are the other things you're seeing that those leaders, what are they doing strategically in this space to make sure their CRM is working well for them?
Well, I guess 2 or 3 things. So I think that they anchor CRM in that growth mentality, right? It's not, they don't think about it as just how do we drive engagement, right? It's not about what platforms we're using, what channels we're using. It's about actually, they don't necessarily think about opens and clicks, right? They think about lifetime value, right? They think about retention curves and repeat purchase velocity, that kind of stuff. So I think that's a key thing, right? I think they think about it in that growth mode alongside what they're doing with acquisition. I've got a number of, well, not number, but one in particular, a brand that I work for, that actually the acquisition and retention team just never talk to each other. And so the retention team were always being chastised for the number of customers that they were losing after 3 months. And no one had thought to think about talking to the acquisition team, who were offering amazing 3-month deals, right? Okay. Secondly, I think that they generally go back to first principles and try and think about, why does this strategy exist and how does it align with business and brand strategy, right? So you can't develop a CRM strategy in isolation. It has to be tied into what the business and brand is trying to deliver. So I think that having that as a mindset is really important. And I think we've touched on this as well. So I think that they're successful in the CRM world, in particular, if the leaders in the CRM space, in those organizations, are able to elevate the CRM conversation to the beginning of the conversation, not to an afterthought, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast. So it's about making sure that they empower their teams, and whether that's through skills or the right tools or the right working environment that allows those teams to go from just executing to designing CRM, from just their reporting team to actually using the insights they get from those reports to recommend the next stage of that CRM strategy, from just owning a channel, but to shaping how that channel shapes your strategy, and just making sure that the CRM teams are part of the commercial conversations, right? I don't mean a commercial conversation in terms of how you're going to support trade this quarter. Actually, the bigger conversations around what CRM brings to you as a business over the next 2 to 3 years. I'm thinking that far ahead, right? Not a CRM strategy for the next 6 months, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, when back in the olden days when we launched the Game Station Elite loyalty program, when I was working at Game, that business case was a 5-year business case. And it had all these kind of core elements of 3 or 5 words. It was longish in terms of, yes, we're going to make money hopefully from from CRM, but we've got all these other data, all these other, ways in which we can generate revenue from, as you said, okay, we now understand our customers a lot better, so we can change the in-store experience or the online experience, or we can sell some of this insight to suppliers, or what. There's like a million different things, I think, that are added on. I think your point about senior leadership buy-in is, of the 3 or 4 things you mentioned, is probably the most important, I think, in terms of getting stuff done and changing a brand's perspective on CRM. Because that was where I've seen the biggest change. Somebody came in to a business who had worked at Boots and had Advantage Card ingrained in them, and all of a sudden we just went from 0 to 100 miles an hour now very, very quickly because they could see the value. So I think it's a really good point.
I just one other thing. Well, I think so that I often talk about the fact that CRM practitioners should think more like brand practitioners sometimes. But actually, to the point that you just made, I think that sometimes brand practitioners should think like CRM practitioners every now and again, because I think that the two are intertwined, right? From my perspective.
100% agree. Okay, so let's talk about a topic that is super important, but is starting personally to feel kind of tedious because it's everywhere, which is AI. It's one of those things that it's terrifying at times. It's fascinating. It's infuriating. It's exciting. All those things. And like I say, is getting a little bit like, can we have a marketing conversation that doesn't center around AI at some point? But from your perspective and the work you're doing with clients, let's kind of break it down, make it simple. What worries you and what excites you about the arrival of our AI overlords?
The overlords have been there for a few years, right? They've just not been so prominent and powerful, right? So, in our world, the use of essentially mathematical models, algorithms, right, to drive a bit of personalization, predictive analytics, right, next best action, it's been there for a while, right? It's just that it's now on steroids, right, because of the amazing computing power that we have, essentially. So I think that bit doesn't scare me.
Yeah, maths is maths.
Math is maths, right? The bit that scares me is the fact that, well, a couple of things, I guess. One is, maybe I might not touch on this one just yet, but let's just park the word hyper-personalization to one side for a minute, right? Probably touching on something that we've talked about in this conversation is, does AI instill a certain amount of strategic laziness? In the same way that you say, well, I'm going to outsource my thinking to an agency, I think there's a definite possibility that we're going to start outsourcing our thinking to AI, and that causes 2 issues for me. One is whether it's in the world of personalization or whether it's in the world of brand and content creation and the use of generative AI. Does it create just everything being a bit average? Yeah. There's a bit of study that they've shown that the outputs of AI, when put in front of a human, the human will always rely on playing safe to a certain extent. Yeah. So they it doesn't matter how, because we all want creators to be, left of center every now and again, to inspire, to educate. But we might end up just being a little bit too average, I think, because we're scared about where this goes. And because it's come out of the machine and not a conversation with a creative team that you've worked with closely over the last 2-3 months to create that idea, that proposition, you might trust the machine slightly less. So you kind of work on average. But also, if everyone's using the same data source to a certain extent, right? Where are the new ideas coming from, right? And if you're not clever enough to manage the machine effectively, right? So people often talk about this blend of person and AI. Then it'll just go off and do stuff that actually isn't of much use to anybody. And we've all been there, right? Because we all use the models, right? We all use, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and we've seen the rubbish that it can churn out if you don't manage it properly. I guess it's a bit like agencies, right? If you don't brief the agency in the right way, you'll get poor service, and it's the same. And it's the same with AI. I think I'm just worried about that sameness that we'll get from AI. That as practitioners, what do we become if we just rely on the machine to do everything for us, right? I don't think many people got into marketing or get into marketing to be budget holders, right? And to manage a budget, right? Well, I'll just put this money to one side to pay for the agencies to do that creative work, and I'll just put this money to one side so that the AI can do the thinking from me, and I'll put the two together, and I'll just sit there. I mean, maybe there are marketers like that, but where is the fun in that? I mean, by all means, have a conversation with the AI, right? And do a bit of bantering and toing and throwing, but ultimately, it has to be you that makes a decision, right?
Agreed. The other thing that always strikes me when we talk about, I use AI as a research tool. I almost treat my AI as like a junior research assistant. It's like, I need to understand this, go away, come back to me with a report, and then for the love of God, make sure you check the sources, because my God, sometimes it's like this percentage of people, that's not quite what that source says. But academic studies of students across the world who rely heavily on AI have reduced cognitive capability versus people who are trying to, use it as a tool or figure the problems out for themselves. And that's scary. I find myself sometimes, if I overuse AI, feeling dumber. I lean on it too much. And if you're in a meeting with people, which, still happens,
hopefully,
you can't do that. You can't do that. You've still got to be able to.
And in the world of CRM, where everything is data driven, right? And I wrote this down because I wanted to make sure that I got this right. But you remember do you remember the Donald Rumsfeld quote about
no knowns and unknowns?
Right.
And all that. Yeah.
So if I get this right, so AI excels at the known knowns, right? And even possibly gets around the known unknowns. But what about the unknown unknowns, right? So in our world, we get lots of digital data, right? The footprint, whether you call it the digital footprint, whether you call it the digital exhaust fumes, whatever we want to call it this week. So we're kind of good at that. So we understand what's happening, when it's happening, how it's happening. But we don't really know, and AI doesn't really know why it's happening. It doesn't know why a customer is doing that at that particular moment. It doesn't understand context, which is why, even though we're data driven, as a senior CRM strategist, that actually putting yourself in customers' shoes, talking to customers, right, doing ethnographic work, right, understanding why they're doing things on a day-to-day basis, as they're setting up a TV box or whatever, or setting up a game station, is fundamental to delivering an amazing customer experience and understanding the customer journey. And I know we're going to have digital twins and artificial data sets that will mimic customers. I'm not convinced yet that AI is good at those unknown unknowns. Yeah, we should still think that human interaction and a bit of hard work on the side of the brand and the agency will still ultimately deliver the right experience and communication for customers.
And the other thing I think is, no brand is putting their actual results from their actual programs actually out there into the real world. Now, you can talk about awards submissions. I've written awards submissions and I've seen awards submissions, and to be honest with you, they wouldn't pass peer review. For anyone, I know the FEs have a higher standard, and I know like IPA and all that kind of stuff, right? I get that there's rules and stuff, but even so, it's a rosy picture. It's a cherry pick might be too strong a term, but you're trying to create the context to win an award, and you're not going to put your bad stuff out there. No one's putting out, actually the control group makes it look like we made it worse. No one's putting that out there.
And we've all been there, right? And we've all been there where the control group or an idea that we've had around how we personalize on a website has made things worse, right? But
yes,
that doesn't appear on my CV.
Right? No, and then you get into the whole conversation about two-tailed versus one-tailed significance testing and all that kind of stuff. How could it possibly make it worse? Oh, well, anyway, I look at that and I go, well, if AI is trained on publicly available data and it's looking at these amazing case studies where brands are putting out their best numbers, and it isn't seeing all the dreck that happens, how can it possibly make a correct,
It's
answer?
because I think that the reason probably why you're successful in terms of what you do is because you've learned from your mistakes, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, yeah, hopefully, right? So, and we all make mistakes, right? So I've sent CEOs to board meetings with the wrong numbers, right? I've run out of when we used to send out paper billing. I've run out of paper, so we couldn't send out the bills to our O2 customers, right? But I guess the trick is you learn from those mistakes. Not everything is perfect, right?
100%. So let's talk about, there are undeniably, like I'm a skeptic, but there are undeniably some positives to AI. So if you were to sort of look back at the last 12 months or so, what would be, you think, well, what's the thing that you've got looked at and gone, oh, that's good, I like that, like as a use of AI?
I tell you what fascinates me in reality is not the flashy stuff, right? It's not AI is creating great ads, or as we were talking about earlier, cloning my voice, right? Which is great, right? So what really piques my interest really is where brands have understood the role for AI, rather than that. So they understand where it sits in front of a customer, right? So, and as we talked about before, AI has been around for a while. So when I was at Natura, I know this is more than 12 months ago, but when I was at Natura, we had a skin diagnostic tool that sat on your phone, snap on your phone. That essentially, it graded your skin and made product recommendations, right? Nothing fancy, but, and it's kind of like, it's a stock product these days. Now, AI wasn't particularly groundbreaking, but its real application and its real benefit was the fact that it empowered the 5 million Natura sales reps to be beauty consultants, right? And the whole raison d'etre of Natura was, and then similar to Avon, was to empower those individuals to earn some more money, right? So here was a tool that, yes, at first glance was there to help the customer choose a product, but actually it empowered the rep to do their job better and actually give them a sense of fulfillment. So I think that was a lovely example. And then your listeners have probably all know about the Klarna example, where they decided, well, we don't need a customer service team, we'll just get it all to AI. And then they backtracked on that because they realized that actually that wasn't the right experience to deliver to the customer. So I think that we'll get it wrong, but I think that making that brave move to backtrack on that original decision was a great understanding of how AI should be deployed. And then there's, not that I use their product very much, but there's a brand called AG1. It used to be called Athletic Greens. Horrible looking and doesn't taste very nice, but apparently it is good. It is good for your brain. But they were ramping up nicely, successfully, getting bigger and bigger, and decided they wanted to use AI for their customer service. So, and they made a really good job of it, right? So they educated the tool with products but also brands in there and understanding the customer. So if the customer mentioned that they were going on holiday, right? So they wanted to stop their subscription, the AI might say to them, have you considered the travel packs that we produce? So they're nice, right? But they realized that actually the AI wasn't right for their community aspect of the organization, right? The community aspect of their customer engagement. So when it came to reviews, etc., and feedback that customers were giving, that was given to humans in the team. Yeah. And that dual approach actually, I think, shows that the real role for AI, which is there is some stuff that AI is brilliant at and can be kept there. And it's the stuff that actually as a customer, I just want sorting really quickly, just get out and do it. But there's some stuff that I want a human interaction with. And so if I'm giving you feedback, I'd actually like to speak to a human about that feedback and that experience that I've had. Or if I'm working in a luxury environment, I still want perhaps to go into a store and talk to a sales rep or a consultant. I know that Joe Malone recently launched an AI scent advisor. So you can go onto their website and you can talk about the type of fragrance that you like and suggest other brands that you've loved, other fragrances, and it kind of gives you some recommendations. But then the real benefit there is that I still don't think that people will buy a scent on the back of that AI conversation. But once they go into the store, they have a better idea of what fragrance they might be interested in, and they have an intelligent conversation with the individual in the store. And if you're set up properly in the CRM omnichannel world, the sales assistant might have that recommendation sitting on your profile, right? So again, they know, Rob, you were interested in a musk fragrance. I don't know whether musk is something you're into, Rob, but
I don't wear aftershave. The only scent on me is beard oil. That's my, which I believe is vanilla and tobacco currently.
Nice.
So there you go.
Well, so Rob, we see that you're interested in vanilla and tobacco.
Vanilla and tobacco. Yeah, exactly. No, I think you're 100% right. I'm working with a breakdown company at the moment, and one of the biggest benefits they have is when you're broken down, you don't want to be talking to an AI. You want, I need to talk to a person. There's a reassurance element to that. There's a understanding nuance. There's an understanding stress and urgency, and there's context clues and all those kind of things. And I think you're absolutely right. Well, look, we talked about abdicating thinking and how important thinking is, and you talked about education. And I think one of the things that you have just recently launched and I have contributed to is your CRMBA, your Mini MBA for CRM practitioners. So you've spent a lot of time, say, educating marketers in your career, and I know you've done a lot of work with the DMA, Direct Marketing Association here in the UK. So kind of why has that been so important for you? Do you think it's undervalued? Are you a sort of Mark Ritson who feels like, training is sorely lacking in today's marketeers?
So you're right. So I spent quite a bit of my time, training. I had to think about it, and I remember I've done that kind of training when I was at Royal Mail, at Publicis, when I was at EHS, and the DMA. And I think it is sadly lacking. I think that in our world, where do you get an understanding of the principles of CRMs? You often go into a new job and you learn on the job, right? And you end up listening to webinars and podcasts and trying to pick up from there. Or you might go to a platform and the platform will tell you, well, this is the way you should be doing CRM, but it's obviously linked to the platform. Or you could go to somewhere like the DMA. But I just feel that there are, I had a quick search on LinkedIn, and I think that there are 16 million people in the world that have some kind of a CRM affiliation on there. And a lot of them complain about the fact that actually they don't have a seat at the strategy table, right? They don't have a seat at the commercial conversation when that happens in whatever room that happens. And so I think that you get lots of training around how to improve your opens and clicks, right? How to use the technology to execute better. But if you then want to move on to become a better marketeer, right? You want to become a head of CRM, right? Or as we've talked about earlier, if you want to do a bit more brand work, if you want to become a CMO, right? So where do you get the training from a CRM perspective that allows you to take MBA frameworks and apply them to CRM thinking, right? How do you get lots of different perspectives on what loyalty should look like and how that's evolving over time? That's why it was great that you were able to deliver a lecture for the CRM Mini MBA. So I think it's about empowering those individuals to think more strategically, to understand how to deliver a better presentation to a senior team, how to ask better questions, right? So I either ask better questions of your AI tool or ask better questions of the CFO, the CMO, right? The Chief Customer Officer, so that you can make sure that the CRM that you're delivering, as we've talked about earlier, aligns better with business and brand objectives. I think that, because I published a book in 2024, after that, I just thought, how can I share some of the experience that I've had over the last 20 to 25 years, but also share other people's experiences in the way that can help marketeers. And, when you're doing your work, whether it's freelancing or perm roles, you help a client, often one or two clients at a time. I kind of set myself with that an ambition. I'm going, well, how can I help? Maybe not 16 million people on LinkedIn, but how can I help 1,000 people in my space just be better at what they do? And that's where it came from. And it was no more than that, to be honest.
Well, it was exciting to be, and slightly scary to be a part of. To think that somebody might actually listen to what I say is vaguely terrifying. But I think it's a really exciting thing, and I think it is. I think you go back to the very start of this conversation where we were talking about definitions of CRM, and I've worked with some CRM people who just saw themselves as email marketers or didn't want to get involved in the numbers part of CRM. I'm like, well, why on earth are you in this discipline? Like, if you're not interested in the numbers part of it, or some people struggle with the technology side of it, some people struggle with the psychology side of it, and I think it's a really nice idea, and happy to be a part of it. And hopefully, as I say, it kind of kicks on from there. Okay, we are running out of time, but we have to ask the final question. The Everybody Hates Your Brand Room 101, the place where business and marketing and just general stuff that my guests don't like get put into purgatory forever. I have not yet declined anything, so I feel like I'm doing a terrible job. But you have your opportunity to present the case for the thing that you despise the most about whether it's CRM, marketing, business, training, AI. What would you like to propose as your entry into room 101, please?
Well, I've whittled it down to one, and
Okay.
I might have alluded to this earlier on in the conversation. Hyper-personalization, right?
Interesting. Okay, I'm interested in where this is going.
What that, genuinely, what does that mean, right? So hyper-personalization lends itself to the fact that there's some amazing technology out there, right? There's lots of data out there, and so we feel the need that we need to personalize to the nth degree. Yeah. Whereas I think, first of all, that rubs against my mantra of personalization without purpose is pointless, right? Mm-hmm. So just because you've got all this stuff doesn't mean you have to use it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in particular, if you then don't measure the incrementality of what that personalization gives you. So I think that if for me, the whole point of personalization is to meet a customer's need or want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So nothing more, nothing less. So I don't want marketeers to pander to the technology, because you can do this. I want us to pander to customer need and want and deliver on that need and want. If it's not solving a problem for the customer, then why you personal? Yeah, and the other angle is because actually my wife is a doctor, and she tells me that hyper anything is not good.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I think it's hilarious when marketeers claim, and often commentators on CRM say that hyper personalization gets the customer to say, "Wow, this brand really knows me and understands me." I've yet to come across anyone in conversation that has ever said to me, "Wow, that brand really knows me and understands me by the way that they're personalizing their content." They get upset when there's a fail in personalization. But I'm not convinced that consumers are wowed by personalization.
Well, I think for me, I wrote an article a while back called "Relevance is Mandatory, Personalization is Optional."
Nice.
So you can be relevant without being personalized. Personalization can help, as you correctly pointed out, if it's in the right way. One of my favorite quotes, it's two great quotes. One was I've said on this podcast by Chad S. White, who is kind of like an email marketing guru. And he said something that I've since used actually in client presentations. I'm like, well, it was on my podcast, so I feel like I'm entitled. Which is that personalization is a slider, not a switch. Yeah. So you ramp it up or ramp it down depending on what's necessary for the task, because the more you ramp it up, the harder it is to do, because so the marginal benefit at a certain point just isn't worth it. So hyper-personalization at a certain point it's so much faster. You've got the data, does it work? And then secondly, it ties into the next quote, which is from the Loyalty Science Labs, which was that personalization isn't fairy dust, it's nitroglycerin. It can blow up in your face if you get it wrong. And I've always been a believer in that, which is we're trying so hard to reach this hyper-personalization utopia. But bad personalization, I'm convinced, is worse than none. Because if you mess it up, it can be a real problem. So I'm sorry, go.
No, that's it. And just by looking at the needs and wants of a customer, right? Understanding what data you need to deliver the right level of personalization, then plays into another mantra I have, which this idea of minimum viable data, right? So you only collect the data from a customer that you need to move the relationship on a step, or to meet that customer need or objective at that point in the customer journey. And I think that you mentioned that, the data piece. I think that, hyper personalization means hyper data, right?
It's just another marketing term that feels unnecessary. So all right, I'm gonna acquiesce. Somebody needs to come hire me and say something that I really don't agree with. But I understand it. I think I understand the point of where you're going with it, and I think so I think hyper personalization as a term absolutely can go into room 101. Well, look, Gianfranco, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. It's been great to have you on.
Yeah, great. And I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much, Rob. Especially you've had some of my favorite people on the podcast as well. So it's nice to be in that crowd,
in the pantheon.
Yes, pantheon. Nice. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. The link to the CRMBA is in the show notes. And if you use the code ROBV20, that's ROBV20, you'll get 20% off when you sign up. For now, that's all we have. So until next time, take great care and be vigilant out there.